Our look at the interface of Photoshop and some of the tools that we're going to be using a lot. But before I do, I wanted to talk a little bit about the background layer of our image here. And what that means is the background is just referring to this image that I first dropped into the file. It's this image on my desktop over here. Photoshop, you'll notice, has a lock on the background layer. And what that means is if I go to paint onto the layer, you'll notice it will not let me paint onto that layer. If I go to layer 2 here, for example, I go to paint, I can paint on that, but I can't go to this background layer and paint on it. And that's because Photoshop has locked this layer. It's not letting me do anything to it. I have a few options. If I want to unlock it, I can simply go over here and double click on the background layer. We'll get this menu pop up here. It's asking me if I'd like to call it layer 0. If I click OK, now the background designation is removed, the lock is removed. Now this is layer 0. If I hit key E, I can erase things on this layer. And you'll notice if I do, since this is a background layer, you see a gray and white checkered pattern like this, you have reached the rock bottom basement, so to speak, of Photoshop. There's nothing underneath there. And let me show you here with the previously background layer removed. This is what we have. So let's turn that back on, and let's put our background back together, so to speak, by let's just make everything bigger. Let's take this layer. I'm going to click Shift, and I'm going to drag, and I'm just going to make it, just make our image a little bit bigger to restore the base of our image. So let's continue with a few more of the frequently used tools to the left over here. This is a text tool. I do use this from time to time. With the text tool, you can create logos. You can use Photoshop to make posters and banners and all sorts of typeface-oriented items and documents. You'll notice that when you get onto a text layer, you create a box and drag it to designate how large of a space you would like the text to occupy. It fills in with some generic, rather nonsensical wording. You can override that a few ways. You can click off of it and then highlight it and then just start typing the text that you want in there. You can also hit delete and it'll remove everything at once. Now you'll notice that if I have some letters on a layer, the letters will be behind other elements that I've made. You see, I moved the lettering behind this other layer, layer 1 as it would be. If I would like to get my letters visible and in front of everything, I can left click onto the layer and drag it up. You see where that blue line went to? And now my lettering layer has been moved to the top of my layer stack. These layers, think of them as transparencies. Like you've worked in collage before and you've used transparent paper or semi-transparent paper, and you've used it to draw what's underneath it. Photoshop lets you do the same thing but digitally, right? So I can create another layer here in the lower right, click on brush with B, and I can, like, say I wanted to trace this, and I want to copy the lines here, I've created a drawing by using that layer. It's one of the many helpful things about Photoshop. And then you can see the drawing I just made. I can manipulate it in any number of ways. I can turn it, move it, elongate it. And of course we can duplicate it, right? If I right click on this drawing, which is layer 4, I get a menu you see on the right. I select duplicate layer. It asks me what I want to call the layer. Let's give it a name. Let's call it duplicate and say OK. Now we have a duplicate layer. At the moment, it's directly on top of layer 4. So we'll click on move. We are on move already. If I left click and drag this down, there's our duplicate of the drawing. And likewise, I can manipulate this any way I like. I can even have them sort of layered on top of each other. I wanted to talk a little bit about, in the upper right, we have a navigator. And at the moment, you can see that the navigator, it just looks like a miniaturized version of what we have in our main workspace over here. But if I begin to click on this larger mountain on the right, you can see I'm starting to zoom in. And now in the main portion of my workspace, I'm zoomed in. You can see now I've got a red box in the navigator corresponding to the workspace where I've zoomed in. What I can do is, if I'd like to move around my image, I can do so through the navigator. Let's zoom in a little bit more, and now we're in this portion of the workspace. Another way we can move around our workspace is we've got sliders here, and here again you can see it's corresponding with the navigator over here, and also along the bottom we can move to the left and to the right in our image. Again, we're corresponding with the navigator. The navigator is very helpful. I use it quite frequently to find my way around an image, and to when I want to really get into details with something. You'll find the need to zoom in on something. Let's say I wanted to really get in here and use my lasso to get more refined detail in this bolt here. You'll notice the lasso tool, I didn't talk about this before. There's a polygonal lasso tool, and that's not an easy word to say, but that lets me create a lasso with very specific points to it. You see how there I left clicked 5 times to create this shape, and now within this shape, if I click B to get my brush back, I can fill it in with the foreground color, and things that are selected, that's what you're working with at that moment, right? So if I hit Command D and deselect it, let's do another one. If I click on L, which is the hotkey for the lasso, and I'm still in the polygonal lasso, I can make another shape. With these, with this one, you have to sort of end up near the beginning, and you see how I did that, right? A Command D. I'm starting here, I'm clicking, I'm making a shape. I can't say at this point, well, I'm done, and start working within what I've got here. I've got to get back to the beginning or close enough to the beginning, Photoshop will fill in the gap for you if you sort of click away from it. And here again, if I want to just work within there, I can paint a bit, and there we have that. Let's zoom out. Also up here, if you click swatches, you see we have the ability to choose from wide variety of colors, right? Even a grayscale, very helpful. To select one of these colors, you see I've got the eyedropper tool appearing when I hover over a color. Say I want this green, I click on the green. You'll notice that my foreground color over here has changed to that green. So if I hit brush, I'll have that green, and likewise any other color I choose from over here. Have the ability to choose colors this way too. I believe there's about 2 million colors that are available in Photoshop, and you have them all at your disposal. Looks like we're in this violet that I chose before. If I want that same violet but a bit darker, I can choose it this way, and it changes immediately. Say I want to get into some oranges. I can go down here onto my color grade and choose these. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about brushes. In your version of Photoshop, it comes with standard brushes, and the standard brushes are fantastic, and you can create an entire body of work just using the general brushes that come with Photoshop. There are some professional designers that have made a whole career of using just the general brushes in Photoshop, and they're fantastic. The best way to get familiar with these brushes is to play around with them, and you'll find that each one gives you something a little bit different, and that's kind of the point.